Hey there, welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great companies. All the tips, tricks, tactics, everything that you need to know and to understand if you're interested in building a company that's going to last, building a company that you want to keep. My name is Brad Giles, and as always, I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Kevin, how is life in sunny Canada today?
It is awesome, and it's very sunny and warm, which is something we really celebrate in Canada because it doesn't happen as much as it does other parts of the world. So yeah, it's a great day. It's all, you know what, it's always a great day. It's part of the thing is I always believe it's a great day. So I might sound like a broken record saying that, but 99 times out of 100 it is. So yeah, things are really good, and a good chance to enjoy the sun. Got some good times with some friends and family, and life is good. My son had his graduation party last week. Graduating high school, we had to have a quiet little party because you only have 10 humans. They can't have a normal graduation celebration like most people get to. So that was a big deal last week. We got to do something fun and some fun with his friends. It was actually that was good. How about you, Brad? How are things in your world?
Very good. 8 degrees this morning, which is quite cold for where I live. I know that in Canada that might be a sunny day, but life is good here. A couple of COVID outbreaks again across the country, which is nothing, to be fair, in relation to some other parts of the world. But the new strains of the virus are becoming more and more virulent and escaping. They're talking about if you're at the end of a hotel corridor, the room-to-room transmission chance is much higher. So people want to go to hotel rooms and be not at the end of the corridor. There's lots and lots of things like that because a lot of people are in hotel quarantine.
Really?
And it's being transmitted in the hotels. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff, but everything is good. Things are booming and going well. As always, though, we begin with a word or phrase of the day. So, Kevin, tell me about your word or phrase of the day.
Yeah. Well, mine today is seat time. And as you know, I talk about a passion for cars and racing, and time in the seat generally has a good correlation with making you faster in a race car or anything. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I actually heard this interesting story about Warren Buffett, who is, considered to be the most successful investor in the world. Interestingly enough, because of the power of compounding, his consistent returns are very good, but not the best. The reason that his wealth is accumulated like it is because he started investing when he's 10, and I believe he's now in his 90s. So it's consistently getting good returns, above average returns, but over an 80-year period, it turns into something magical. And it really makes me think about many of us in what we're doing. I've been doing this thing now. I don't even like to count the numbers, but I think it's well over 25 years of working with CEOs and executives in scaling companies. And seat time, good seat time, good practice, good discipline practice becomes very, very powerful. That's why, generally when we think about wisdom, we think of people that are, over 50 rather than under 50. Not that we don't all have wisdom. So I just think about that story about Warren Buffett, and basically is that a majority of his wealth, the serious numbers came in the last 10 or 20 years after, 60 or 70 years of doing it is when his real wins came in. So because he's living so long and healthy, and I hope he continues for a long time, that is a huge component of his wealth. So it's less about how well he picks stocks and just that he owns them for longer periods of time. Because there's other stock pickers or investment people make decisions who actually have a much better track record in terms of, he has an average of about roughly, 20-ish% growth a year in that range. But there's another gentleman who's in the 60s, 60%, but he's not as old as Warren and hasn't been investing as long. Anyway, really interesting. So the value of compounding over time.
Wow. Thank you. Mine is nowhere near as sophisticated as yours. I don't throw my toys out the cot very often, but I happen to do that this week with a leadership team. So my word is preparation. Okay. In fact, I would say it would have been several years since I've lost my cool with a team. But this week gone, I had a very special occasion where a team had lost money for their business this quarter, or at this quarterly workshop. They'd lost money, and there was two members in particular who joined the team about a year ago, and over the past year, they hadn't done any of their homework in preparation. And so I'm going around the room and I'm saying, so tell us about your reflections on this particular item agenda. Like one of them was reading and another was a question. And we went around once and they said, I haven't done it. And then we went around a second time and they said, I haven't done it. Now, these people for the last 4 quarters were saying the same thing. They just weren't coming prepared. And
I can only imagine.
And they are not doing their job and losing money. And so, mine is preparation, my word.
So what does it look like when you, throwing the toys out, losing it, freaking out, whatever you want to call it? So what does that look like? What does that sound like? I would love to have seen that in that room.
I bet you would. Well, because we're not their boss. An advisor or a coach is not their boss. And so it's about creating a credibility chasm. It's about being careful with your words. It's about talking about their behaviors and not who they are. It's about saying, you're disrespecting this environment. It's about, this is how much preparation I do to come to today. And I've asked you to spend 30 minutes reading and considering so that we've got actions. And you're disrespecting your boss, you're disrespecting your peers, and you're disrespecting me by not even being able to do that. And so it's letting them know that they are, effectively doing the wrong thing. And in a calm, considered, no, it's not calm and considered.
Well, I've had a few of those, Brad, where I've called out, where I lit them up, and I'm just like, you guys, this is unacceptable. This is a serious meeting, taking serious time out of the business, and we are all invested in making the company better, but it only works if we all come prepared.
Yeah.
So you need to think about, if you want to be on this team, it's an expectation that you come ready to go, and stuff happens once in a while, but this is the second time.
Yeah.
So my request is, if you're not willing to prepare next time, then uninvite yourself from the meeting.
Yeah.
And that's like an adult conversation, but I've had similar situations, and like you, I've thrown my toys out a number of times. Much less so. I've kind of managed myself better now, but and I work with better teams. I work with the teams who work there are outstanding, but it's very frustrating. And unfortunately, what you've touched on and what I've also learned is we got to be careful not to do the CEO's job.
Mm-hmm.
And some CEOs aren't comfortable with creating that kind of tension. And I've learned to be careful not to do their job too much. Although at the end of the day, it is my meeting that I'm running, but it's their company. But it's a fine line. But yes, it's, when you care, it's infuriating when people show up like they don't care.
Yeah.
Good one. Well, speaking of caring, today we're going to be digging into a topic that relates to really caring, and that's about, caring for your new colleagues when you merge two companies together or you acquire a company. And how do you show up with that caring in a way where you bring them in and make a stronger company going forward? So the official title, Brad, and make sure we get this right. How do you integrate cultures when companies merge or a company is acquired? So the first thing we got to call out on this and most people know it, there is rarely a merger. Rarely. I have been a part of one, at least potentially two, that were legit mergers, but in almost all the cases, it's an acquisition. A
Yeah.
company is a more powerful one in the transaction acquires another one. Um, so we know that. But what we want to look at from the perspective is, how do you take two great teams of people and bring them together? And whether it's 1,000 employees and 10, or 500 employees and 500 employees, conceptually, how do you really do the work of bringing them together? Because it's often a messy process. And not only is it painful for the people, but the companies end up not being very well integrated. There's still, because it becomes us and them and subcultures and all kinds of really weird stuff. So we're going to dig into this, and any kind of thoughts that you would kind of lead us off with here, Brad, from your perspective.
Yeah. So I'm running a workshop last week, Thursday and Friday, with a team. And one of the slides that I use when we're talking about core values, I say that there should be between 3 and 7. Now, I know, Kevin, your take, we've spoken about this before, is you want 3 core values. But let's be fair, we both agree. If you get
3 to 5, 3 to 5. I think if you go beyond 5, you've exceeded the word core. Now you're just getting into values. But we don't need to debate that. Just agree that I'm right, and then we can move on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're what we are agreed on. If you're getting 8, 9, 10, you've got too many. Okay. So
yes,
I've got this, and I show a few slides where they're case studies of, or they're examples of companies' core values to set the tone. And then I show an example of how not to do it. And it's this poster that's got 22 core values on it, because it's outrageous. It's a joke. Like, no one would remember what half of those core values are, let alone how to behave. And so I use that as an extreme example. So then I'm in this workshop on Thursday, and I show it to this leadership team. And then this one lady, she says, "Oh my God, I was in that team when we built those." And I'm like, I recoiled a little bit. It's been an interesting week, let's be fair, between that and then the toys. But I recoiled a little bit, and I was like, okay, tell me about that. And she said, it was the biggest nightmare ever, because we started off with good core values and we were strong. And then we acquired a company, and then the executives thought it was a good idea to merge the values. So we brought on some of their values. And then we acquired another company because they were in acquisition mode. And then we merged some of their values. And she said, we did that. And it was a nightmare. And the culture was terrible. And we lost so many good people from our company and the acquired companies because the culture became so terrible.
Yeah. And that's people who they were doing the best they could, but they did not understand culture and really what core values are meant to be and do.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important. And I've seen all kinds of crazy things when it comes to, by the way, I had a similar scenario where I had a slide of what not to do, and someone else had been there, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. And that's I'm very careful of showing too many bad examples, but I had a similar one. It'll come back to me which one it was. So, one of the points that we start off with when you're going to bring companies together, and look at, there's companies where you just basically buy the assets, and you're at 1,200 employees, you buy the assets, and 3 employees come over. We want to treat those people with respect, but that's a little bit different. We're really when there's a notable scale of company that's coming in, and no matter how it's going to work. But the main thing is you got to have a plan. This is not a project for the accounting team. This is not a project for the sales team. This is a company-wide thing to really maximize it and make it work well. And so you need like a 12, whether it's a 12-day plan or a 12-month or a 24-month plan, you need a plan, because there's a number of steps and it takes time. In many ways, it's just like onboarding an employee, but you're onboarding a whole batch of people that come with existing systems and existing culture. So, and with that plan, remember that you're trying to really get the hearts and minds aligned, and then the systems. The systems are That's just work. But getting the hearts and minds aligned is where the value is, because then you have them with you instead of thinking you're, bad people or foolish or whatever it happens to be. So, a real detailed plan, and ideally the team that is leading this would be the acquiring company. That team, as part of getting the acquisition done, works on this plan. Ideally, they have a good rough draft of it that they run by the company that's being acquired or the partner that they're merging with, and involve those people in the thought process on how to make it most effective. That's just, early stages of getting buy-in from those people rather than forcing it down their throat.
And isn't that what you'd want to hear if you were part of the acquired company? If you were the one that
Yes.
was being purchased, you'd want to hear, okay, the culture won't be the same. It can't be, but we're going to work very hard to make sure that we can make this thing work. It would give you a real sense of optimism that would be preceded by a sense of vulnerability. What's going to happen?
Correct.
Am I still going to have a job? Is it going to be a horrible place to work?
Yes.
I've heard bad things about that company that's buying us. I've heard they're a terrible company.
Well, especially if they're a competitor.
Yeah.
Right? One of them could be easily perceived as a monster, and there will be stories about executives on one side or the other. And because when you got a competitor, your job's not to love them up. Your job is to go against them. So there's all kinds of anxiety. And again, there's still going to be anxieties. But really, to have a thoughtful plan, thinking about getting those hearts and minds engaged before you get into the process stuff.
And when I've been involved in these deals as a coach advisor for the leadership team, we've spent, in the preceding 2 quarters, we've spent full days working on the culture aspect. How are we going to effectively bring these 2 cultures together? And at the outset, I tell you, the teams hadn't done any thinking about it at all. And by the end of those 2 days, they were like, this is an enormous job and we've got to get it right. It's so important because we could lose many people on both sides of the equation.
Correct. You could lose many people, but worse, you could miss out on massive opportunities because you're just thinking of it from a tactical point of view, which takes us into our next point, is you got to have the humility to look for greatness on the other side. And I think at this point, about 50 mergers or acquisitions I've been involved in through my clients, like a lot. And I wasn't deep in all of those, but they've been a part of them. And one of the things that we found the most valuable is the more dominant company often assumes they've got it all sorted. And then they want to just convert the new company to their platform. We set up an expectation where we got to start, okay, we got to go mining the gold out of this other company and bring things together, because this company's been around for a long time as well. It makes lots of money as well. There's got to be some good things there. And for example, in one of the companies that we acquired, and it was an outstanding company, but they had an amazing learning culture and learning and development system that they had built.
Yeah.
So instead of assuming that we're better and we're bigger and we're smarter and blah, 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 we were hunting for it, and someone found this gem in what they did, and we found ways to integrate it into the overall company. But it's more of a mindset than anything of just truly looking for the good so we can maximize it. And that only lasts for a few months.
Yeah.
But that it's a critical step in starting off in the right direction.
Yeah. What comes to mind when you mentioned that, there was a person I know, their company was acquired by a much, much bigger organization, and they had that humility. It's so important because they looked in and figured out that the management system, the way that they were running their management system was so effective that they said, we want you to come and implement that into 4 or 5 of our other companies. And we want you to run that process. So yeah, that humility is step number 2 or our second point for a good reason, because it's very easy to just say, okay, so that means that we're going to need another 3 workstations in the sales team or another 30 workstations in the sales area. But it's so much more than that.
And you're just not respecting the other people. Like at the root of it, you need to honor and respect what they've done. Now, You might fully let go of all the systems and processes they have. That might be the final decision, maybe. But you got to start with respect, and it gets you on the right page, which takes us into the second piece is, we were talking about this before, we've both done a lot, but is you really got to know the talent ideally before the deal closes.
Mm-hmm.
So, as part of due diligence, in many cases we do, and people go and meet the people and figure out who's who in the zoo. In an ideal scenario, we go and do full-on top grading interviews and really understand who the top players are. And so we did one in a US company where we were number one, we acquired number two. Funny thing, after the acquisition, we're talking to the executives, and they're like, "Oh, we're so glad you bought us," because we were destroying them in the market.
Yeah.
At the same time, the companies hated each other, so we had a lot of work to do. But so what we did after getting each of the key leaders top graded, we knew who the A players were. And we assigned key people to work with those people, build a relationship with those people, stay close to those people. So we kept them at any cost. And the other ones that weren't as key, we still worked on it, but there was the at any cost list, metaphorically, because we knew who those key people were. Interestingly, there was a very senior person that you would have expected was key, talked and acted like they were key, and they weren't on the list.
Yeah. And there isn't as much a surprise there because you did the work, because you did the preparation, going back to the earlier word, right? Because you had the plan and that preparation, understanding the talent. I saw an article probably 3 weeks ago, and it was an analysis of the companies that Apple has acquired. Okay. And what they're doing is they're actually, the only thing that they are acquiring is talent. Okay.
I've heard about this.
Yeah. They are not worried.
You buy the company, keep the people, and chuck the business.
Yeah. They don't care about the business. What they do is they look and they say, in this specific technical niche, we are very, very weak. And then they look and they go, who can we acquire? And they don't care about your revenue. They don't care about your patents, none of that. What they all they care about is, and so therefore they do the valuation based on the quality of the talent. Okay. Now, you're not Apple. They're not Apple. Sorry, the listener isn't Apple. But the point is that the talent is one of the really important things that you are acquiring. So you've got to know it. And you've got to be prepared to make the hard calls about talent if they're not going to make it in your organization.
Yeah, and do the right things to protect those ones who are critical. And again, you don't know who they are until you really dig deep. So really, understanding what the talent. So the third one, and this is one I've seen some amazing, simple ideas over the years that they're so obvious, but not common. And that's really aligning the relationships between the leaders and the managers and the front lines. And the simplest, best tip that you are foolish if you don't do it is that it's called the buddy system. Just like when you were in kindergarten or grade 1, it used to be that you'd have, when you go out for recess, everyone would hold hands with somebody else. Now they probably don't hold hands. That's probably not cool anymore. But you would have that person, that buddy system. As I remember as young adults going out carousing to the bar, we'd use the buddy system too.
And you were trying to find someone to hold hands with.
Yeah, but in a different way. Yes. But it's basically our CFO and their CFO have a weekly meeting where they talk and connect, and you're basically starting to build bridges or connections between people. Our head of sales and their head of sales, our person in charge of Latin America sales and their person in charge of Latin American sales, our controller and their controller, our COO and their COO, our safety officer and their safety officer. Like all of these people building bridges and relationships, both with the intent to, mine the goodness and look for the brilliance on the other side, but having a set weekly meeting so that they can be connected. Because instead of when something goes wrong, going and, complaining up the chain of command to how these people are idiots, they've got a direct connection to say, hey, can you give me a hand with this? And so it's like you take the whole organization and you lock, you almost everyone gets a buddy, or most of the key people get a buddy. And it's magical because it accelerates the learning curve. It accelerates the culture and helping people get in sync with the culture. And it just solves a lot of problems.
And that's a really important point. And the question to that is, who's responsible for merging the culture? And everyone really has a role to play. And very specifically, line managers, I want to call out. Line managers have a role to play and need to have priorities that need to be executed in a merger around culture. So it's very easy for line managers to say, yeah, we've acquired this company, and yeah, I've got this other team, but you know what? I got all this other stuff to do. You don't understand. I'm too busy. I don't have time for this culture stuff. And everyone has to have a role to play if you're managing people. It's not just the CEO or the senior people. Yeah.
Awesome. So basically, how do you find, and there's other ways to align relationships. You could have the accounting team meet with a whole accounting team and have a brainstorm about a process or a policy or whatever the heck it is. Like there's meetings, but the basic of the one-to-one with the key people, it really, and then people don't feel lost in the system. It really helps. So the next one is aligning the core values. And Brad's example up front, I love it. They brought 8 companies together. They kept all of their values and mashed it into one massive list. It wasn't 8, but it looks like it was 8. And that's just wrong. Because, truly core values, as Brad agreed, should be like 3 to 5 on a list, right? Not 23. I know Brad thinks it can go up to 7, which is okay. We're allowed to have different views. But whatever it is, it's a handful and keeping it simple. And so we've seen a few different things. In an environment where it's a pure merger or a pure reset, which is less common, we've started clean slate. So we brought 2 companies probably 8 years ago, 2 companies together that were both bought by private equity, and they wanted to literally merge them as a platform to build on, which we did. We did a ton of acquisitions after that. But we started with a clean slate, new purpose, new BHAG, new core values. Everything was fresh. And so we started from that, and we did a brilliant job. But that is rare. But that is one way to do it. The other one, and maybe Brad, you want to talk about this one, is where you kind of onboard people onto the existing values of the more dominant organization. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah. I think that there's no such thing as a merger. Okay. I think that maybe in 0.1% there might be, right? But it's almost always an acquisition. There is almost one person who is doing the deal. There is money that is flowing one way, or assets that are flowing one way, and there is one person who will be the CEO at the end of that deal. And so if that is true, that it's all about acquisitions, then the job to be done is to say, what is the dynamics? How are we going to make this work? What does the leadership team look like afterwards? And how do we bring the values to a place, whether or not they change is not even the question yet, to a place where we can unite this culture. And the people who are leading the organization primarily, it connects with their beliefs that are bone deep, the beliefs that the deeply held beliefs. Yeah. Because if the leadership team is essentially staying the same at the end, the core values are probably unlikely to change. If the leadership team is a mashup of two organizations, you may need to rediscover the group's core
That's
values.
a great filter, Brad. If the leadership is intact, odds are you will onboard them to your core values in a way through a process and discussion of helping them to find the alignment. But if your executive team is changing dramatically with this other team, you might reset it, or you might reset it, or give a notable edit or revision to it if the executive team is changing notably. Great way to look at it.
But let me be clear. In my humble opinion, the worst thing you can do is give the two sets of core values to marketing and ask them to solve the problem.
I would throw my toys out. I would yell. First of all, I never let marketing touch this stuff. Marketing, I come from marketing, so I can say marketing does not touch it until the very end when they are locked.
Yeah.
Because marketing puts persuasion language and customer language on it. Core values aren't. They're our heart and soul. So yeah, you don't do that for sure. And just to mash them together, it's like, again, for us, core values are a strategic tool. It is the list by which we fire and hire people. If you have them, you get to stay. If you violate the core values consistently, you must exit the building.
So the other worst thing that you can do is say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a survey of everybody in all of the two companies.
And then make it a popularity contest.
Yeah. And let's try to figure out exactly.
That's called a lack of leadership.
Yeah. So don't do that.
See, you're making me mad. Like I'm getting mad here because it's like,
that's
no,
good.
It's an executive. Now you might get.
This is about entertainment. If you're getting mad, we're getting entertained.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. I do. I have to be careful getting mad. And I remember recently, as a side note, I got mad at a CEO in a meeting in a way that probably exceeded appropriateness. Actually, no, it did. And I end up having to clean up after.
You know what? Don't apologize, because we bring passion and we need to be respectful and do the right thing. But passion comes with a few other things. So let's move on.
It does. Okay. So we got the values, and you need to consciously onboard people to them or redo them, but you don't just make a bigger list. Go ahead, Brad.
So next one is aligning the strategy and execution. So what we need is one plan. The old phrase, okay, we need everybody on the same page. So if we've just talked about the values, okay, and to a degree, perhaps the purpose, okay, are we rediscovering, are we onboarding? Then we move on to, we've got to align the strategy and the execution. So we need one simple plan that can unite the whole organization. Now, maybe there are different industries, maybe there are different areas, but there are still some common elements that we can draw upon. So so everyone is going in the same direction.
Yeah, so that would mean if you look at the longer term strategy, that this new company, if it's a merger, it's all part of one, right? Or a pure acquisition where they're folded in. Sometimes you acquire companies and they still operate somewhat autonomously or independently, but it's clear how they fit into the flywheel or fit into the strategy. Like they see their part in the strategy, which is critical. So the alignment might just come in the long-term strategic piece, but they're aligned, or they might be fully aligned all the way through the tactical level. And the key piece, and what we've done, sometimes with some larger acquisitions, they will run autonomously for a while, fairly independently for a while. But what we do is we get them onto our strat planning framework. We get them taking all of their thinking and they get their own one-page strategic plan. We make sure that they have their own quarterly goals, and we get them, even though they're doing a lot of stuff on their own, we get them using our strategic planning ecosystem, get them on boarded with the language and the approach. And then sometimes, that's for ones that we don't blend in right away, but they're aligned through at least the strategic thinking and always tied into the flywheel and the BHAG. Point is get them working so they're more in sync with you.
And so then once we've got the values and the strategy and the execution line, we've got to think about the processes. And sometimes this is where we've got to fall back to the humility comment before. Like we've got to be humble that they might have a better sales process than us or a better finance process than us. So with a humble mindset going in and understanding what is the best practice amongst the two, which one is going to serve our needs better, and then aligning and merging the two where appropriate, making sure that we have one single process for this that everyone knows how to use.
Correct. And note, for those of you that are listening today, this is the number 7 item on our list. For most people, it's the only one. And that's why there's such a challenge with integrating acquisitions, and it creates way more friction than it needs to, is because this is the tactical process, and we spent all this our energy on the hearts and the minds and the strategy. Then we get to this, where a lot of people, okay, well, we'll get the accounting teams together and we'll line them up and get them on our ERP. It's like, well, that's not that doesn't work. Or you miss massive opportunities, let's say, and you create way more friction than you need to. So yes, at some point you align them. All right, finally, number 7, celebrate, evaluate, and realign. Hey, this is new. You got to find ways to celebrate all the stuff that's working, right? And really, this is great, an acknowledgement of true things that are good, and then evaluate the stuff that's not working so you can tweak it, and then continually realign people. Bring them together, have brainstormings, have planning meetings, whatever it happens to be, for those key leaders to continually getting aligned to what matters most.
And one of the things there is core values awards can be something that I certainly use with a lot of companies. Core values awards, whether or not you've rediscovered or you're reusing, if some of those awards can go to the new company, it can be quite beneficial, or the acquired company, it can be quite beneficial. And then also core values stories around that celebrate, evaluate, realign concept. What are the core value stories, getting those things out there?
Absolutely. So in summary, the idea here is that when you're going to bring companies together, acquisition or more appropriately, or sometimes merger, is you got to align the hearts and minds to start with, and then kind of get the strategy piece, and then get down to the processes in the end. And it's not just about aligning processes, because there's people involved. And we've talked about, 12-day or 12-month plan, humility to look for greatness on the other side, get to know that talent even before you finalize the papers, aligning the values in one way or the other, aligning the strategy and execution systems, and then the processes, and then finally celebrate, evaluate, and keep optimizing it and dialing it in.
Awesome.
So that's a pretty good discussion. That's a great, man. If people did that all the time on acquisitions, it would make people's lives a heck of a lot easier.
Well, as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And, when acquiring, we are going to end up being one big company. So we need to ensure that the culture is right. What a good chat. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, and you can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au. And Kevin Lawrence, you can find at lawrenceandco.com. Of course, you can always find us as well on YouTube if you search The Growth Whisperers. Thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed the episode today about company mergers and culture. Look forward to chatting to you again next week. Have a great week.